So this wouldn't be the first time that Cardi B and Candace Owens had a beef over something. I think it's been too many times to count. But this time, Cardi B has come out to defend pornography. It's a really important issue to her. And I think Brett astutely observed before we started the show that Cardi B and WAP specifically couldn't even exist in a culture that hasn't been thoroughly pornified. And what Cardi B does for a living is not all that far off from what a porn star does for a living. But I'm sure that the arbitrary delineation between the two really matters to her.
Oddly enough, like I would say that would have been true like 10 years ago. These days, I don't even know if it's necessarily true. Not because they actually do have a problem with it, but because they'll be dunked on if they claim that it was like we talked about somebody recently where they were like, excuse me, I've never done porn. Not that I have anything wrong with people that do that. So it's like you're allowed to be indignant if somebody suggests that you yourself do it, but then you have to then in the same breath say, not that there's anything wrong with that.
It's like the Drea De Matteo thing where they were like, how dare you call my friend a hooker? Not like there's anything wrong with being a hooker. Yeah. I don't believe you that you that you feel that way about being a hooker, actually. So this all precipitated because Candace Owens posted last week the following tweet: ban pornography. It is a psychological weapon intended to weaken our men. And it caused a lot of controversy. Thank you, guys. Hold, please. Crisis parties are a psychological weapon used to weaken men. I'm kidding about that. Give us more crisis parties.
Yes.
So this got reposted a lot of different places, but Cardi B found it on Instagram, and she decided to throw in her 2 cents in the comments. So this is what Cardi B had to say. OMG, why y'all so against porn? Is it that bad for y'all? I enjoy it, but I don't know. I guess is like a 6-time-a-year thing. I personally don't feel no connection or addiction to it. Just a little quick 1-2, ... Nothing like real intimacy. And then she continued, how it actually should teach men how to please a woman. I think that if you asked the International Conference of All Women Everywhere, that they would disagree with Cardi's take. But, you know, she believes that porn actually is helpful for men. And it's not a psychological weapon used to weaken men at all.
That's a very bad take.
Maybe the idea, maybe what she should have said is it creates unrealistic expectations towards sex for both men and women.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, she doesn't seem to have any criticism of porn whatsoever. Yeah. Because, you know, I mean, look at the WAP music video. Read the lyrics to WAP. That's basically porn. And the difference between that and porn maybe wouldn't have existed if you asked someone even just 10, 15, 20 years ago. But our culture is so pornified now that it is ubiquitous and you don't even know that you are being forced to consume it.
It is funny to read Cardi B's response and then look at the response of people who disagree with her in her comment section from like politically active figures. Cardi B is basically saying like, what's your problem? It could teach you how to be better in bed. And everybody else is like, on a constitutional level, I do not support the idea of using the government to ban such things. Which is, you know, two very different approaches to the same conclusion. Exactly, right? So it's like you can take very different paths to come to the same conclusion. But how many people would have thought that, you know, the average conservative would agree with Cardi B just for, okay, maybe not the average conservative, the average libertarian,
the average libertarian.
The average libertarian would agree with Cardi B, but for vastly different reasons.
I think that the intellectual argument is really just the Cardi B argument in disguise to sound like there's a good reason to allow this shit to, you know, be propagated in our society, especially to children. The average age of exposure being, 11? Which implies, obviously, there are tons of children being exposed to it way earlier than 11. So really, given the market demand for it, that is just what society collectively has decided is a justified human cost for the good that pornography brings them.
But I don't think banning it will stop people from consuming it. So
yeah, it would make it less accessible. It would make it less frequent.
And I mean, technically right now you are supposed to be over the age of 18, right? So I'm wondering, like, how else do you deter the use of pornography? Because I agree with Candace, even if it wasn't consciously created as a psychological weapon, it is a psychological weapon on the psyche of not just grown men, but as you said, children, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna like come up with a bunch of policy prescriptions because obviously pornography is it's never going to be banned. Maybe I'll say that and I'll be surprised decades later from now, and
it is true.
It actually will be, but I highly doubt that that's going to happen.
It is 110% true, however, that men's desire for women has helped build whole civilizations, and that right now porn acts as a pressure release valve for instincts that would have also helped them, the desire to prove yourself attractive to a mate and to grow your place in society can be curbed when your sexual desires and your sexual needs can be curbed. So it does work. Whether it was intended for that or not, I tend to take a rather darker approach that it really is just, in the mindset of America and I guess the world of capitalists, that it's a need, it's a market, and they're fulfilling a need in a market. But it is true that the unintended side effect is that men will become complacent because they have access to it. That is true.
Well,
who said men did way more stuff when boobs were harder to see?
It's true.
Yeah.
They didn't like.
But
I don't know who said it, but
that is not. However,
and like your lizard brain really viewing pornography, the human lizard brain beneath all the wrinkles, it's thinking, like, especially for the evolutionary psychology of a man. It is thinking like, yes, like you are fulfilling your biological imperative right now. You are doing what you are supposed to do right now. You are spreading your seed and you are a successful male. And obviously in reality, none of that is true, but you're getting all the biological cues that that's true, which is a dangerous precedent to set.
There's two 20s there.
Pat the plumber said, if we hit 10 crisis parties, I don't JoJo see why Sarah can't do the JoJo Siwa on PCC.
I mean, we'd have to teach you the
You guys
JoJo
don't want to
Siwa.
see.
They want to see it.
They want to see.
That's like one thing I
They
can't
just want
do.
you. They want you to pretend to have a seizure.
I guess you don't need to know how to dance to do the Siwa, though.
And Mr. Anderson, awesome take on psychological weapons and banning them, and now do social media and women.
I did not have my take was the truth of what I believe to be the truth of the matter. That does not mean that my stance on it is that the government should get involved and ban it. I tend to think that overreach from the government is always a bad choice.
Yeah, that's a bad take by Candace too, honestly.
What is?
Saying to ban pornography.
I disagree. I
Or, like, I
fully
guess
agree
it's-
that should be what happens in any sane society. However, I don't think it's realistic.
It's I guess saying it's a bad take is not really correct, but it's like it's an extreme reach that doesn't actually change the situation.
Unenforceable policies like this
It's
always
extreme,
feel to me like the type of thing, like there's a reason why the right, not to turn this into politics, why the right campaigns on guns and the left campaigns on abortion, because they're problems that are omnipresent and they will always be able to raise money. And even the same things, like I was talking to someone recently about like, well, like why is the border such an issue? But when the Republicans had a supermajority, they didn't get the funding for the wall, right? Because deep down, everybody knows that both sides use those wedge issues to raise insane amounts of money, right? So an issue like this just seems to me like something that they'll be able to raise money on, that, conservative politicians will be able to raise money on for the next 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
I don't think I've seen any conservative politicians talking about pornography as a social issue ever.
I'm just saying
it's
that
just now kind of breaking into the mainstream.
It's becoming more mainstream now. Like that issue.
I have not heard a
more
single
mainstream.
politician talk about this.
So it will be it'll be interesting to see whether somebody actually goes forward. It would be very, very hard to do anyways, and a lot of people will just tell you that it's something that the states have to decide for themselves anyway, and do with the Constitution.
I mean, I think it is a huge issue, and I would love for it to start getting addressed more. Although it's uncomfortable for people to talk about, we need to talk about it.
Well, part of the response has been from corporations. So like, for instance, I think Visa, MasterCard revoked their services for MindGeek Corporation once Trafficking Hub and other activists were starting to talk about how they have hosted CP on their websites knowingly.
Oh my gosh.
And that's been like many different documented cases that's happened. And it's weird
And
how
nobody goes to jail for that?
you know who the CEO of Facebook is, and you know who the CEO of Twitter is, et cetera, et cetera. You don't know who the CEO of MindGeek is. I'm just as ignorant. I don't know who the CEO of MindGeek is.
I don't even know what MindGeek is.
Solomon,
but I figured it out.
parent company of Pornhub.
Solomon Friedman is his name.
Yeah, but nobody knows that because nobody talks about it, and that's they don't go into the media and talk about what they do for a reason because they don't want to get found out for all the illegal things that they do.
Yeah.
But I agree with it in principle. I don't think that pornography is going to be banned. However, there are other intermediate ways to deter people.
I just always get like the spidey senses go up whenever it becomes these things where I'm like, this seems unenforceable. And now, of course, that's just me saying, look, I'm a dummy.
So is an abortion ban.
I'm a dummy. Like, I'm not the dude who's going to be the one who's ever going to figure these issues out. But whenever I see things that don't seem to have a clear solution, at least not one that even, like, I feel like the solution should be readily apparent to a fifth grader most of the time, since the government operates at about a fifth grade level most of the time. So when I see issues that don't have readily available answers, all I see that is something that to keep your base angry and raise money on.
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah, go off, Candace.
Yeah.
I'm taking the opposite view.
I mean, I just think, you could say a lot of things are unenforceable, but, so would an abortion ban. Just because some abortions would still occur if abortion were federally banned doesn't mean it's not a valid thing to push for.
I think a lot of people think the middle ground is like, look, the government isn't the answer. Socially, we need to, a lot of people talk about the idea that shame needs to be brought back. Maybe perhaps shame towards using these things is a social pressure that you can put on them for doing that.
The law teaches people to shame.
Yeah.
For instance, why Julia Fox said that she's been celibate for 3 years after Roe v. Wade was overturned. And that only further motivated her to continue her celibacy despite living in New York, where she is free to get as many abortions as she wants. The law taught her to behave a certain way.
It's and also, and I think the other argument a lot of people make, like, look, monitor your kids as best you can. If they're getting access to porn at 11, there's a breakdown in your parenting that gave them access that should never have been there. I mean, I see a lot of people now talking about, like, my kid's not getting a phone until he's much, much older.
Or even worse, he could be watching Mr. Beast videos, and you don't want that.
Oh my goodness!
Oh no!
Have you seen that Squid Game video? He's immense. I did see a thing from Mr. Beast recently talking about he wants to work with A24 Gag.
I saw that too.
About making like a horror movie about a horror game show, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, okay. So with that being said, I still have no idea why it is that like it is just always interesting to me how the mainstream media is like, Candace Owens, let's talk about her. I'm like,
well, Cardi B is clearly obsessed with Candace Owens and she needs help.
How does she even know who Candace Owens is?
I feel like
they've before.
I feel like they agreed on, or no, maybe Candace Owens and Nicki Minaj agreed on something.
I think Cardi B made that video talking about how groceries are getting way too expensive.
She did do that.
And like all the conservatives were like, yes, it's Biden's
I always like the cut of her gym. Every time.
Right, they're going to pretend they were always
every time a
Cardi B
lefty
fans.
celebrity says something not nuts. They're like, I always like, that's the worst on both sides. Both sides do this. Like whenever somebody dunks on somebody, then all the comments are like, I never liked the look of that person anyways. And then they're like, oh,
Nicki Minaj, I hope that your cousin's friend from Trinidad finds a solution for his swollen balls.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.